The terminal lights reflected off the wet tarmac like shattered glass, fractured and trembling. Rain streaked the windows as Veronica Summers stood frozen in front of Gate A6, her airline blazer soaked through, her hands trembling despite the heat of her coffee. Across from her, a little boy in a navy blue blazer clutched a toy airplane, his wide brown eyes never blinking. "Mommy said we were just going to see the clouds," he whispered, voice barely audible over the boarding announcements. Behind him stood the man she had kicked off the flight, still silent, still composed, his gaze fixed not on her, but on the airline banner fluttering behind her like a flag of betrayal. The screen above them flickered once. Then it changed. Her name appeared. Not on a flight manifest. On a termination notice. Digitally signed, by Marcus Carter himself. The air in the first-class cabin was unnaturally still, thick with a tension that no champagne or silk eye masks could mask. The plane hadn't even taxied yet, but time already felt suspended, like everyone on board had been frozen mid-breath. Veronica Summers stood stiffly in the aisle, her polished nails clutching the in-flight manifest like it might crumble under her grip. "I'm going to need you to step off the aircraft," she said again, slower this time, as though speaking to someone foreign. The man didn't move. He sat poised in seat 1A, legs crossed, one hand resting on his thigh, the other gently placed over his wife's hand. He wore a deep navy suit that looked custom-made, clean, elegant, unbothered by the confrontation brewing around him. His gaze was level, not angry, just tired. "Is there a problem with our tickets?" he asked, his voice low and calm, a subtle southern drawl threading through it. "No, sir. But we've had a complaint. About your child." The word hung in the air like a slur. Elijah, the 5-year-old boy nestled against his mother's side, looked up with wide eyes. He gripped his toy plane tighter, small fingers trembling. The plastic wings had chipped paint. Veronica's eyes flicked down to it, then away, quick, involuntary, almost like it disgusted her. "We've received a report that he was causing a disturbance," she continued, her tone clipped, rehearsed. "For the comfort of our other first-class passengers, we're asking." "Who complained?" the wife asked gently. Her voice was velvet-wrapped steel. Veronica blinked. "That's confidential." The silence that followed was more deafening than raised voices. Marcus turned toward his wife and son, brushing Elijah's curls from his forehead. "Come on, buddy. Let's go see the clouds another day." The boy nodded slowly, confused but obedient. But Marcus didn't rise immediately. He stood only when his wife did, and as he turned, he met Veronica's eyes. It was the first time she really saw them, sharp, unreadable, deep like the kind that have seen boardrooms, battlefields, and betrayal. "We'll leave," he said. "But this won't be the last time you see me." Veronica swallowed, her throat suddenly dry. She didn't understand why her spine tingled. Just another entitled passenger with a too expensive suit and a family to match. Or so she thought. The walk of the Carters down the aisle became a moment etched in the memory of every person in that cabin. No yelling. No drama. Just a quiet dignity that made others shift in their seats, unsure which side of history they were sitting on. And as the doors closed behind them, Veronica exhaled. But something felt wrong. Back at the terminal, she received an urgent call. From corporate. No details. Just 3 words. "You need to come. Now." When she arrived at the executive conference floor of the airline's headquarters that evening, her badge didn't work. Security escorted her up. Silent men in dark suits waited at the elevator. Not a word spoken. The boardroom was filled with faces she only recognized from the orientation slideshow, investors, senior executives, the CEO, except not the one she thought she'd see. Marcus Carter sat at the head of the table. His suit had changed, but his eyes hadn't. She froze at the threshold. Her voice barely a whisper, "You're..." "Yes," he replied. "I am." One of the executives cleared his throat. "Ms. Summers, please have a seat." She didn't move. Marcus looked at her, not with rage, not with vengeance, but with the kind of stillness that shakes a person to their core. "Do you know why we're here?" he asked. She managed a nod, but her mind screamed confusion. Why was he here? Was this a trap? A test? He continued, voice steady. "Today you made a decision. Not based on our service policy. Not based on any real infraction. You made it based on what that child looked like. Based on what I look like." Someone in the room shifted uncomfortably. Another executive reached for a glass of water. Marcus leaned forward slightly. "I wrote that policy." A pause. "I designed every part of this first-class experience. From the thread count on the seats to the diversity guidelines in the handbook you signed when you were hired." Her lips parted, but nothing came out. "Do you know how many meetings it took," he said, his voice thick now, "to make sure families like mine didn't have to endure moments like today?" The silence was unbearable. "I've never filed a formal discrimination claim. Ever. Not in 30 years of business. Not until today." He slid a folder across the table. Her name was printed on the tab. "Everything will be handled according to protocol. You'll be paid through the end of the month." It wasn't just the end of her job. It was the erasure of her identity, her uniform, her position. Everything she thought she held in control. Veronica's knees weakened. But before she turned to go, Elijah's voice echoed in her ears again. "Mommy said we were just going to see the clouds." And suddenly, the clouds weren't up in the sky. They were inside her. A fog of shame, of regret, of a single choice that unraveled everything. As the automatic doors slid shut behind her, she looked back one last time. Marcus hadn't moved. But the storm he brought had only just begun. Long before headlines, lawsuits, and closed doors, there was a Monday morning in Atlanta. The kind of day where the sky draped itself in gray, indecisive light and the city stirred like it had forgotten how to breathe after a long weekend. Inside a modest but sunlit kitchen, Marcus Carter stood in front of the stove, wearing a plain white t-shirt and gray joggers, flipping pancakes shaped like airplanes. His son Elijah sat at the counter, kicking his legs, a worn toy plane in one hand and syrup smeared near the corner of his lip. "Do the engines roar, Daddy?" Elijah asked, waving the toy like it was taking off. Marcus smiled, voice mimicking a low rumble. "They roar so loud, they wake up the clouds." Vanessa Carter chuckled as she walked in, her presence like warm jazz, smooth, confident, grounding. She tied her silk robe tighter, leaned in to kiss Marcus on the cheek, then wiped syrup from Elijah's chin with one graceful swipe. They were ordinary in that moment. Not a CEO and his family. Just parents, tired and joyful, surrounded by breakfast smells and small laughter. But nothing about Marcus's rise had ever been ordinary. He wasn't born into comfort. His first taste of flight had come from the bleachers of Hartsfield-Jackson Airport, where he used to watch planes take off while his mother scrubbed bathrooms at Gate D. He remembered tracing the white streaks they left in the sky and whispering to himself, "One day." One day came, but not easily. Marcus worked 3 jobs through college. Studied finance by day, cleaned floors by night. Every flight he took in those early years was in the last row, middle seat, near the bathroom. And still, he watched everything. The way flight attendants smiled. The way they scanned passengers for trouble. The way privilege had a tone you couldn't quite name, but always recognized. When he started his first airline consulting firm at 28, he didn't wear a suit. He couldn't afford one. But he had ideas, ruthless, elegant, efficient. The industry mocked him. Then copied him. Then offered him shares. By 40, Marcus Carter owned controlling interest in one of the largest luxury domestic carriers on the East Coast. But he never forgot what it felt like to be ignored. Or what it meant to be seen. Vanessa had been the first person to truly see him. They met at a charity gala. He wore the same suit he'd worn to 4 previous events, pressed carefully, tailored poorly. She wore red. Not the loud kind. The kind that asked for nothing but still changed the room. They didn't talk much that night. Just enough. Just enough for him to notice the way she didn't flinch when others judged, or the way her laugh came only when it meant something. It wasn't long before they found themselves walking under rain-slick streetlights, past closing cafes and flickering signs. She asked him what he wanted. He told her everything. She didn't laugh. She didn't blink. She just said, "Then you'll get it. And when you do, I hope you still remember this walk." He always did. Years later, on the morning of their flight to New York, Marcus packed deliberately. No assistance. No security detail. No entourage. He was taking Vanessa and Elijah with him on a rare unaccompanied trip, just the 3 of them. "I want him to remember this," he said. His first big plane ride. First class. "I want it to be perfect." Vanessa raised an eyebrow. "You sure that's not more for you than him?" He smirked. "Maybe. But he'll remember the way his dad showed him the sky. That matters." Elijah had dressed himself, kind of. A tiny blazer over a Marvel t-shirt. 2 different socks. And in his hand, always, the plane. At the airport, Marcus declined the VIP entrance. Walked through TSA like everyone else. Nodded politely when someone whispered his name. Nobody expected the Marcus Carter to wait in line with a 5-year-old. But he liked it this way. "Power's quiet," he once told Vanessa. "The loudest ones don't have it." On the walk to the gate, Elijah stopped to watch another plane land. He stared with the awe only children possess. "Do you think the clouds get tired of holding us up?" he asked. Marcus kneeled beside him. "Sometimes. That's why we thank them when we land." When they reached the gate, Veronica Summers was already there. Clipboard. Headset. Smile that didn't quite reach the eyes. She looked at the family, then back to her manifest. Then at the family again. Marcus caught it, the pause. Veronica didn't say anything, just nodded curtly and waved them aboard. In seat 1A, Marcus leaned back, watching his son climb into his own seat and press his nose to the window. Vanessa slipped her hand into his. "I know that look," she said. "What are you reading?" He shook his head. "Not reading. Remembering. Her. Yes. She'll show herself. Give it time." He nodded. "And when she does, I won't need to raise my voice." Outside, the runway shimmered under a late sun. Inside, the silence before the storm curled its fingers through the cabin. Elijah turned, his voice small and full of joy. "Daddy, do clouds cry too?" Marcus closed his eyes. "Sometimes, son. When no one says sorry." The tension didn't arrive all at once. It crept. Like fog on polished marble, like a whisper you weren't sure you heard, but couldn't unhear. Veronica Summers had been with the airline for over a decade. She wore her title like armor, senior cabin lead, and believed the order of things had a purpose. Rules weren't suggestions. Appearances weren't accidents. And passengers, well, they could be sorted into types long before they even spoke. She had seen the Carter family enter. Observed the confident walk of the man, the quiet strength of the woman, and the child's open joy. None of it comforted her. There was something about them. Something that didn't fit. Maybe it was the absence of assistance. Or the lack of designer chaos most high-tier passengers carried like perfume. Maybe it was Elijah's toy, sticky fingerprints on an armrest she just sanitized. Or maybe, it was something deeper. Something she never questioned out loud but lived by, like muscle memory. In her mind, the Carters weren't first-class regulars. And that silent belief was all it took to ignite what followed. It started small. "Ma'am," Veronica had said crisply to Vanessa, "I'll need to store that handbag in the overhead compartment." Cabin rules. Vanessa offered a patient smile. "It contains medicine for my son's asthma. May I keep it under the seat?" "Rules are rules," Veronica replied flatly. "Please comply." Vanessa's lips parted, surprised. Not by the request, but by the tone. Marcus gently reached over and removed the bag himself, placing it overhead. Not a word. But his eyes followed Veronica as she turned. Then came the napkin. Elijah accidentally spilled a few drops of juice on his tray. Vanessa dabbed it quietly with tissues from her purse. Veronica approached like she was extinguishing a fire. "I'll handle that," she said sharply, as if discipline were owed. "We can't have sticky surfaces. First class must be preserved." Marcus's gaze lifted. Measured. "Thank you," he said, calm like thunder just beyond the clouds. The moments accumulated. Cold glances. Repetitive requests. A whisper into the headset that didn't need to be spoken aloud to be understood. By the time the flight reached cruising altitude, the other passengers were beginning to feel it too. The unspoken shift. A chill that had nothing to do with the cabin temperature. Then came the catalyst. A young white couple boarding late, upgraded due to a booking error. Veronica fussed over them like they were long-lost friends. Pillows fluffed. Champagne offered before the seatbelt light dimmed. Elijah, curious, asked if he could have a soda. Veronica turned. "That's not appropriate for a child. Juice only." He sank into his seat, embarrassed. Vanessa leaned forward. "Is that your call to make?" "It's airline protocol," Veronica snapped. That was the moment. The moment when the entire row 1, went silent. The elderly couple beside them stiffened. The businessman across the aisle put his newspaper down. Vanessa didn't move. Marcus didn't flinch. But something inside both of them shifted. Not anger. Not yet. Precision. Marcus reached into the pocket of his blazer, pulled out his phone, opened a private interface. No one noticed. But his fingers moved like a conductor at an invisible symphony. A series of taps. A ping sent. The airline's internal crisis code was activated. Not the emergency code for hijacking or turbulence. No. This one was rarer. It was built into the system personally by Marcus himself. Class Delta 1, Internal Staff Misconduct, Tier 5. Only the board had access. And Marcus was the board. Back in New York, an alert popped up on the private server. HR, legal. Corporate affairs. All pinged simultaneously. A camera in the cabin silently recorded. Another function Marcus had once implemented, not for passengers, but for staff training. The flight attendant continued. Now, she stood before them, arms folded, voice too loud. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to switch seats. Your son has disrupted the comfort of our high-tier guests. They've submitted a complaint." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Which guests?" "I'm not at liberty to say," she replied quickly. "But this is a first-class cabin, and certain standards." Vanessa stood. "Enough," she said, voice like glass breaking in velvet. "We've been silent. Respectful. You've crossed a line." A murmur rippled through the cabin. Veronica flushed. "Ma'am, please don't escalate this." "Escalate?" Vanessa's voice trembled, but not with fear. "You think this is escalation?" Elijah clutched his toy tightly, eyes wide. Marcus leaned forward. "Veronica Summers," he said softly. "That's your name, isn't it?" She blinked. "Yes." He tapped again. Quiet. Almost invisible. Then looked at her fully. I designed this route. I wrote the protocols. I hired the executive who hired you. And the last time I checked, no part of our first-class training manual included humiliation, prejudice, or arbitrary hostility toward children, or their parents. Dead silence. Veronica's jaw clenched. I don't understand, she murmured. Oh, Marcus said, standing now, full height casting shadow, you will. 5 rows behind, a man in business attire suddenly stood and approached. Sir Carter, he said. Is everything all right? Veronica blinked. The man wore no airline uniform. But Marcus nodded to him. Flight compliance internal. Posing as a passenger, Marcus said calmly. Your performance has been recorded from the moment the doors closed. Her headset buzzed. A message flashed, report to corporate HQ immediately after landing. Suspension in effect pending review. She looked around. All eyes were on her now. And in the middle of it all, Elijah asked a question. Daddy, are we still flying to the sky? Marcus turned, knelt by his son. Yes, he whispered. And we're going to make sure no one ever tells you where you can't sit while you do. The plane touched down at JFK under a haze of golden dusk, that strange hour when light feels heavy and shadows stretch too far. As the tires kissed the tarmac, the silence in first class was no longer hostile, it was reverent. The man at the center of it all didn't speak. He didn't need to. Veronica Summers stood near the galley door, hands stiff, expression unreadable. Her crisp uniform now felt like a costume too tight, sewn from pride that no longer fit. The jet bridge connected. The doors opened. And Marcus Carter stepped out first, not as a man making a scene, but as one reclaiming something invisible. Dignity. Legacy. Justice that didn't shout. Vanessa held Elijah's hand, her other hand lightly brushing Marcus's back. Not to steady him, he didn't need it, but to remind the world that no power existed greater than their bond. A black sedan waited by the terminal's private gate. Not unusual. But this time, the driver didn't approach with deference. He simply handed Marcus a phone. It's them, he said. Marcus took the call. Boards convened, a voice said on the other end. Media's asking questions. Internal Affairs has already leaked the footage. We thought you'd want to be ahead of it. He nodded. Let it release. Uncut. No press statements yet. Let silence speak first. A pause. Understood. What do we tell Summers? Marcus glanced behind him. Through the terminal glass, he saw Veronica standing alone now. Her headset gone. Her posture collapsed. He exhaled. Tell her. I want to speak to her. Personally. 2 days later. The office at Skylight Airways headquarters sat high above the clouds, glass walls, silent corridors, and the soundproof quiet only money could build. Veronica Summers entered the room like someone walking into her own funeral. Marcus sat at the end of the long table. Alone. No legal team. No assistants. Just him. She stood. Waiting. He gestured. Sit. She did. I assume you've seen the footage, he said quietly. She nodded. Yes. You've also read the company charter. Yes. Marcus leaned forward slightly, resting his hands. Then you know that by policy, your actions qualified for immediate dismissal and possible charges under FAA bias conduct review. Her throat bobbed. I know. Silence. But it wasn't cold. It wasn't vindictive. I want you to understand something, Marcus said. This isn't about humiliation. Not mine. Not yours. She blinked. Then what is it about? He looked at her. Not as a judge, but as a man who'd walked through fire just to keep from turning into ash. It's about what we do, when no one's watching, he said. You judged my family before a single word was spoken. You turned service into control, kindness into compliance. And you treated my son like noise in a space that should have honored his voice. Veronica's eyes shimmered. But she didn't cry. People like you, people like me, we carry power. In uniforms. In protocols. In silence. A beat. You misused yours. I did, she whispered. Another silence. Then, surprisingly, Marcus stood. Walked to the window. I didn't ask to own an airline. I designed this system so no child of mine would have to beg for dignity in a place their father built. He turned back. I'm giving you one choice. Not two. Veronica frowned faintly. You will undergo a full 6-month retraining under the Skylight Human Conduct Protocol I'm rewriting as of this week. You will speak to every new flight attendant class. You will begin your first speech with the sentence, I once forgot what service really meant. She swallowed. And when I'm done, she asked softly, do I return? Marcus tilted his head. You'll return when they say you're ready. He handed her a folder. Inside, photos. Passengers from that flight. Elderly couples. First-time flyers. A cancer survivor. A little boy with a homemade airplane drawn in crayon. And one photo of Elijah. Smiling. Forgiving. She closed the folder slowly. And nodded. 6 months later. Elijah Carter pressed his nose to the window again, watching the clouds race beneath them like wild horses. We're flying higher this time, aren't we, Daddy? Marcus smiled. Always higher. A gentle knock came from the aisle. Vanessa turned. Then Marcus. It was her. Veronica. No longer in a lead uniform. Just a service vest and a soft expression. She held a tray. Mr. Carter. Mrs. Carter. Elijah, she said gently, may I offer you something this time? Elijah's eyes sparkled. Can I have a soda? Veronica knelt. Eye level. You can have anything you want. He grinned. And in that moment, soaring above the very clouds that once carried tension and silent war, there was healing. Not loud. Not declared. Just felt. Marcus looked out the window. Below, the world moved in slow patterns, cities, rivers, decisions, systems. He knew not all of it could be fixed. Not overnight. But one plane at a time. One voice at a time. He would rise. And no one, ever again, would be told they didn't belong in the sky.